Hello and welcome to In Conversation. I'm Tim Eckott, and my guests today are here to discuss the thorny issue of Sharia law in Britain. The Law Society in London sparked controversy recently by issuing guidelines to lawyers on how to draw up wills according to Sharia teaching. Now, a new organisation called Sharia Watch UK has been set up to look into what it says are the misogynistic principles inherent in this traditional Islamic system. Anne-Marie Waters is from Sharia Watch UK. I'm also joined by Anna Khan. She's head of the Islamic department at Duncan Lewis Solicitors. Anna Khan, let me start with you. You are a Muslim woman. Please explain to us what the word Sharia actually means.
Sharia in Arabic means a path to water. And so in a desert kingdom where Islam was first brought in 1,400 years ago, it was obviously a very scarce resource to have water. The analogy is that it sort of lights your path through the darkness, or it leads to water when you're thirsty.
And of course, the word Sharia to most Westerners now means Sharia law. What is the connection with legal affairs in the Muslim world and the path to water?
So Sharia was laid down in the Quran, which is the holy book of Muslims, and then it was explained through the sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad. And several millennia down the road now, we have a duty as Muslims in every country in which we find ourselves to apply those laws by analogy to our situations now. So the one mistake everyone makes is that it's immutable and it's set in stone and that we can't change it. In fact, it's our duty to apply it to our lives as we live them now as good law-abiding citizens of each country.
So it would be a religious teaching rather than a system of law as Westerners would understand it.
If there's an Islamic state, then they would apply Sharia as a system of law. It would apply across every part of your life. It would be your family life, inheritance. It could be in cases of Sharia punishments. It would be the economic system. So it's not for Sunday best, it's for every single aspect of your life.
Have you any idea what sort of percentage of, say, Muslims in Britain, what sort of numbers or percentage of those would regard Sharia as a relevant part of their lives?
In the last census, about 3 years ago, it was 2.7 million Muslims, about 1 million of them in London. So out of those, a great number are young, under 30. And I'm finding in my daily practice of speaking to Muslim clients and organizations that they are increasingly interested in their faith and applying Sharia as a solution alongside, or rather within, English law.
Now, Anne-Marie Waters, you are behind Sharia Watch UK. You obviously think there's something that needs to be watched. What's your objection to Sharia law as such?
First of all, I completely understand that there's a spiritual dimension to the word Sharia, as Anna has just described it. We're not interested in private religious faith of people. What we are interested in and what we object to is the network of Sharia councils and tribunals and the men who run them. The men who run them are openly Islamists and jihadis.
So in short, you're linking Sharia and its practice and people who advocate it with fundamentalism and extremism?
Well, they are. I mean, what we're trying to do is point out what these Sharia councils and tribunals in Britain are actually doing, what is happening to people in everyday life in this country, and the beliefs of the men who are behind them. That is our concern, and we want to draw attention to it. We oppose them. Now, it's not my concern whether a person can legitimately point to their religion and say, well, I'm following my faith, therefore I can, for example, beat my wife. My position is, even if you're following your faith, it's wrong and we oppose you.
And regarding the law in Britain, or English law, do you have any objection to people like Anna Khan advising people on how Sharia law may work alongside the law of the land?
Well, there's a problem, isn't there, in this sort of legitimization of Sharia and this creation of what we believe to be an emerging parallel system. For example, the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal has said that it openly campaigns for exclusive jurisdiction over domestic violence. That is a parallel legal system. We believe, A, that Sharia law in itself is very problematic, it's deeply misogynistic, and we don't think it's got any place in a 21st century democracy, regardless of demand for it. We don't give in to every demand. So the argument that there's a demand for it, well, there's a demand for a lot of things. It doesn't mean we should give in to those demands. So we are very concerned about the principles of Sharia, the misogyny that is enshrined within it, and we don't believe it should be legitimised by being placed into the mainstream alongside English law.
Anna Khan, do you recognise the picture she's painting?
Yes, I'm going to agree with Anne-Marie that there are real questions of concern about women's experiences of the law in this country. That goes across all communities, but I'm here just to talk about Muslim women, as are you. And I'm not going to be blind to the fact that every day I will have some issue that makes me very unhappy. And it could be misogyny, as you've correctly said. There is a certain mindset that makes you feel that you are in a village back home in Asia or Africa rather than in the UK in the 21st century.
So you would accept that
I absolutely
Sharia
accept
is
it.
quite basically misogynist?
No, not that. Not Sharia, but the appliance of Sharia, the way they are applying it, as if they are back home in a village in Africa or in a village in Pakistan, Asia, whatever you want to say.
What sort of thing? I mean, can you, from
I'll
your
give an
experience?
example. Sharia by itself gives women rights that they never had under any legal system until very recently in this country. So a woman, if she gets married, is allowed to keep her own name. She doesn't have to take her husband's name. She's allowed to keep her own income, her own assets, her own property. So it's the duty solely of the husband to support his wife and children. She also has a right to pursue learning as far as she wants to. And the example given by the Prophet was as far as China, if you have to. So there's a constant controversy going on about Sharia does this, Sharia does that. And I think it's extremely emotive because if it's an unknown, of course it will scare everybody. It would scare me to think Sharia destroys women's rights. I'm a Muslim woman, practicing Muslim woman, and I believe that women have a right to be protected by Sharia in the way it was given to them.
You don't want to see Sharia adopted as Anne-Marie used the phrase, a parallel system. Am I right?
I don't see why we should apply anything as a parallel system. Jewish law, Hindu law, any law. So my view is English law should be one law for all in an ideal world. It isn't. It is gravely lacking, and where it is lacking in some areas, we need to fill those gaps to pursue justice. And that's something no woman should be arguing against because it means her fellow women are suffering.
Do you, though, see why in many people's minds the commonly used term Sharia, which brings to mind in many people's vision chopping off of hands for stealing and stoning to death for adultery, etc., which we know go on in some parts of the Muslim world, that the very idea that there is a British community, Muslim or otherwise, following the precepts of that kind of law is disturbing?
Of course. You can see it in every newspaper headline. It's on daily in the media, on every source, social media, mainstream media. But that's what this is about. It's about being divisive, not being responsible to the community. If there's 2.7 million Muslims and they believe in a faith, then we should see how that is not going to affect us in any way, unless it's in the wrong ways that Anne-Marie has talked about. I'm very much with her in wanting to tackle those issues.
But does not the encouragement of people to follow Sharia if it suits them and when it suits them, as long as it doesn't break English law, does that not reinforce the fear that there is an enclave being created, a Muslim society within a British wider society about which people have concerns about isolationism, about extremism developing in certain circumstances?
I'm also concerned about that. If we allowed the Sharia councils to practice on their own without bringing them into the mainstream, and if we didn't keep an eye on the way they're working, for example, and didn't apply those solutions under English law, I really am concerned there would be a parallel system, which would actually make people seek them out as a forum shopping exercise. So instead of going to English law, which they see as very expensive, very divisive, very slow, they'll go down to their local Sharia council to get a quick solution. And we can't allow that. So I want to see more ways in which we can bridge that gap.
What do you make to Anna Khan's arguments there, Anne-Marie Waters? What she's saying about allowing women who are part of the Sharia system seems entirely reasonable.
Well, Anna hasn't mentioned a lot of the aspects of Sharia that are rather troublesome, which exists in Islamic states and indeed are practiced in the private councils and tribunals here.
Well, she said she's against misogyny on wherever it stems from.
Well, I mean, I don't know why the no right to unilateral divorce wasn't mentioned. For example, child custody rights for women are denied when the child reaches a certain age.
Is that
Domestic
true?
violence is not.
Anna can't. I mean, just respond to that straight away.
I'd
Is
like
that true?
to respond to each one. So should we take the unilateral right to divorce?
Does not have a right to divorce on the same terms as a man does.
Yes,
and
I think we should deal with
in
that.
opposition to English legal principles.
In England, women didn't have a right to divorce till a few hundred years ago at all. We had to reform the law to get to where we are. In Islam, pre-Islamic society, no woman had a right to divorce at all. Then when Islam came, the man was given the unilateral right to divorce because, as I said, he has the sole duty, financial duty, and the burden of care. So if the marriage wasn't working, he had the right to say this civil contract, which is all it is a contract, is at an end. It's not a sacrament. It's not actually a religious marriage at all. So what else happens after that? As the law develops, in the Prophet's lifetime alone, he gave women divorces by saying you can have the right to divorce delegated to you in your marriage contract. This is what I tell my women clients. In your marriage contract, have it written down that your husband's giving you equal right to divorce. Do not go to Sharia councils. Why make yourself dependent on anyone else?
But what about Anne-Marie's contention that
back?
it's an unequal, that women are entitled under Sharia to have a smaller percentage of the wealth accrued during the marriage? Is that correct or not?
Wealth, now we're on to financial settlements after divorce. Because women do not have to contribute at all during the marriage, they're allowed to keep their own funds. They don't have to give their husband any funds. Under English law, a husband could claim all the wife's assets if he were not as wealthy. So it's up to you in your marriage contract to write down the different clauses. If it's your funds you want to keep, that is yours anyway. If you want to have your husband's as well, you should ask for that.
So, Anne-Marie, that sounds like women have a better deal under Islam.
Look, the whole point of it is that they're not equal. They do not have equal rights. A woman is often stuck in a marriage even when she's being beaten. We've seen the actions of the Sharia bodies in this country who are denying these divorces to women because the Sharia principles say that a man may beat his wife. Regardless of why a man and a woman are not equal, it is still at odds to English law. And the idea that, this argument that, well, women only got divorces in English law 100 years, well, it's 2014.
As 21st century Muslims, we have a duty to be at least as equal to UK law, if not better. So my issue is, why aren't we as Muslims doing that? Why aren't we lobbying for that?
But is it
Why
correct?
are we going backwards?
The simple question we have to answer first is, are there people who come to you who believe in their version of Sharia that they think it's acceptable for a man to beat his wife?
They don't actually think it's acceptable to beat their wife, because they wouldn't come to me, would they? Let's be quite honest. They would carry on beating their wives. The ones who come to me are the ones who want respite from that. So I go to those Sharia councils which completely understand what I'm saying, which a man has no right to do that. First of all, he has to obey the law of the land.
But you're having to explain that because there are people who still believe they may.
Yes, so there are some Sharia councils I have problems with.
It is part of Sharia law. It is derived from the Quran. It is derived from the passage in the Quran, which I'm sure Anna knows very well, which says good women are obedient. If they're not, I'm paraphrasing it obviously, the final wording is beat her. It's in the Quran. Anyone is free to look it up. From there is where they derive their authority. You need to tell that to them. And yet again, mentioning the time of the Prophet is absolutely irrelevant. We are living in 2014. We have laws now which give equal rights, equal divorce rights, equal child custody rights to men and women in marriage. You can try to justify it with whoever earns what money. It doesn't matter. We are asking for equal rights between men and women.
You have not understood at all that now I can write a contract for a woman here in front of us and give her equal rights under Sharia.
If Sharia wasn't unequal, you wouldn't have to write that contract. The point is that the whole principle of Sharia is that men have seniority over women.
That is your main concern, isn't it?
It's where the Sharia councils get their authority from.
As a Muslim and as an expert in English law, but who helps people who've made contracts under Sharia, you do accept this basic principle that there is an inequality operating under Sharia for many women, don't you?
In the way it is applied, yes, I do. And I'm very much angered by it and upset by it. And I think it's our job to make sure that the UK now, in this century, is the best place for British Muslim women to be and to apply their faith.
But what about the Muslim women in Britain who do not know about English law and don't come to you for help?
That's what I want to talk about. The biggest thing that people who oppose Sharia don't realise is that the Muslim women are not even aware of their rights under Sharia. Otherwise, they would be much better protected. So all those women who are ending up losing out are, for example, 80% or more now do not even get married under English law. Would you believe that? And it's going up every year. These are intelligent, informed, professional women. They think that because they've got married under their faith, that's enough and they don't need to do anything else. So I would agree with Anne-Marie completely that that is a real cause for concern. We need a massive program of education, which I have started, which will teach them that they're giving up matrimonial rights, aren't they? Immediately, because their Islamic marriage is not recognized under English law unless it's registered here. The position's different if you were married in a Muslim country. Then it's a legal marriage, it will be recognized here. But they're fooled by all these different ways of applying English law, and they think their marriage is legal just because their brother who got married in Morocco had a legal marriage. I can use Islamic law or Sharia law to get them their Islamic financial settlement under English contract law. And that's what I'm doing so that they're not left without anything.
Anne-Marie, that's a laudable aim, isn't it? To take Muslim women who don't understand either Sharia properly or English law and, as Anna Khan does, help them by saying, actually, under English law, this is wrong, you need to do X, you need to do Y.
Justice can be found in English law. I don't think we need to be bringing Sharia into the English legal system, a deeply misogynistic, unequal religious or legal system, which in its criminal code, as you very well know, is barbaric. Can I ask again this question then? I'll turn it around. You've asked me questions. May I ask you, instead of just talking, like Baroness Cox, like the National Secular Society, like Sharia Watch, I know you always talk about justice, but what do you do for those women? If they came to your door or phoned you and asked you for justice, I tell them to use English law. There is no English law for those women. Ask the judges. You're talking about a religious. You're talking when you say there's nothing under English law. You mean there's nothing to resolve their religious issues? Yes. Shall I give you an example of a woman last week? What do Protestant women do? Doesn't justify setting up a pseudo court system run by jihadis. I've actually got Christian women coming to me and saying, "I wish I could use what you're doing under ecclesiastical law to get justice because it is a fundamental breach of my marital rights." Let me ask Anne-Marie to explain that. What do you mean setting up a parallel system? Because Anna Khan is working within the English system, as you've said you would recommend women to do who find themselves in a predicament. Where do you see this separate system operating? I see it in the councils and tribunals that are running across the country. I see it in the tribunals that you're worrying about, which people are not even being married under English law. Now, I wonder why that is. This is a grip. We have to put this into the proper context of, this is why I said in the very start, it's the men who run this that are of greatest concern to us. They openly acknowledge that they want to increase their grip upon Muslims in this country. The way they are doing it is via a system of family, a network of family courts. I believe that legitimising those courts legitimises those men, it empowers them, and it creates further separation from Muslims from the rest of society. Is your wider problem, I mean, let's leave aside the law for a moment. Anne-Marie Waters, Sharia Watch UK, are you more concerned about the sectarianism implied by having a parallel Islamic system even tolerated? Is that your big problem? It's one of the major concerns, yes, and partly and primarily, I mean, Anna keeps telling us that she's calling for change, and perhaps she is, but it's not. Our website is not about her. The men who we're worried about, the men who are actually running the network of Sharia tribunals in this country, are not calling for change. Their violent, misogynistic ideas are increasingly having power. So it's a political aspect of Sharia that you're long-term more worried about. Who's saying it? I'm not saying there are political ambitions behind the men who run the Sharia councils. They are. They want, for example, exclusive jurisdiction over domestic violence cases. This is one law for Muslim women and another law for everybody else. That's the problem. Have you seen anything of that kind, Anna Khan? I mean, you are a Muslim, you are British, you are a lawyer, but leaving aside the law practice aspect, do you recognise any of that picture
it being painted?
I think my issue is that with the lawyer's hat, I tend to be unemotional and try and analyze the issues. So rather than get hysterical about a headline, I look behind it. So this thing about, the Sharia councils are trying to take over domestic violence, it comes down to the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal saying, we're in talks with the Crown Prosecution Service to try and have a system of mediation in domestic violence. Completely unacceptable. Because when there is an allegation of domestic abuse, it's our duty to show those women a place of safety and then make sure that they're safe with their children. We can't even start any dialogues about the family until then. So if they are saying that, how much publicity are you giving them? The oxygen of publicity by telling them that they are a voice to be listened to. They've hardly got any cases. If you ask them, have you got any cases in which you've done this? They'll tell you a handful. Because I actually talk to these people. Working in isolation, I know who I'm working with effectively and who needs to do more work. So you're working with men who believe that women should be beaten if they're disobedient? No, I do not work with them. I talk to them.
You just said you did.
No, I talk to them, and it's very important I keep up a dialogue. I actually would talk to the EDL, for example. Why not talk to the English Defence League about their ideas? Some people would say it's unthinkable to even talk to them, but they get stronger and stronger by talking behind my back. You need to talk to them and challenge their views.
Empowering them by sending business their way. I take issue with being called hysterical. There's nothing hysterical about pointing out the truth about the men who are doing this and the men who are running these places.
But you need to stay calm about it to be effective and actually do something every day to change it. How does it help to just make them more powerful by giving them more publicity?
Making them powerful by sending business their way and by legitimising their business.
Divorce, Islamic divorce.
You're the one who's making them powerful.
Let me broaden it out a little bit. Anna Khan, I will come to you first. Now is a difficult time to be a British Muslim. There are continual stories in the news about Islam being a threat, Islam being a danger worldwide. Tony Blair's come out and talked about it in the last week. Lots of issues about faith, about multi-faith society, about it causing more trouble than it's worth in effect. As a Muslim working in the English legal system, do you recognise that as a danger, that by even talking about Sharia, you are putting in the heads of many people the idea that once again the British Muslim community is isolated and is seeking to operate under its own laws, its own rationale, and is not becoming integrated properly with the wider Britain? Do you see that?
I can see it becoming even worse with time if people like me aren't constantly trying our best to bridge that gap. Because if Anne-Marie had her way, she would be in one corner, the extremists will be in the other corner, and the vast majority in the middle would suffer because they are normal law-abiding Muslims. So the point is, for those British citizens who are Muslims, stop treating them like they don't have a brain and they don't know what they're doing. They're being pulled between two forces, and it's important to give them a feasible alternative. I don't cover my hair. I am a practicing Muslim. People need to see women like me who believe in our faith, who don't have to look like the standard issue Muslim that's always on the front pages of the newspaper.
And how easy is it for you, as an educated British Muslim woman, to do those things and not be criticised?
It's extremely hard. I'm not here to try and be popular and win prizes. My life would be so much easier if I just did my legal work and went home. But the point is, it's actually my duty in a very short lifetime to try and get justice for people however I can. And English law, the way it is at the moment, cannot give that justice because it doesn't recognise Islamic marriages, for example. I need to tell Muslim women to get married legally and get those rights. I need to help women with divorce.
To make Muslim marriages illegal?
I actually think that they should make Muslim marriages legal only if they're in a registered mosque. And so anything outside that mosque would not be legal. I actually think that could solve a lot of the problems straight away. But we're not doing anything about the root cause. We're just talking about the men on the fringes. Let's bring the majority, men and women who want to be law-abiding, into the mainstream. And I'm actually working with the government at the moment on a major project to make Muslim marriages legal if they're registered.
Anne-Marie Waters from Sharia Watch UK, you've said very clearly that you're worried about some of the Islamic councils and what they may be up to in the wider sphere, let alone the application of Sharia law. Are you prepared for the accusation that you are somehow victimising the Muslim community by campaigning on these issues?
I'm prepared for it. I'm used to it. It doesn't concern me. I have every
Shouldn't
right
it concern
in a
you, though,
democracy.
if it's divisive?
I have every right in a democracy to oppose any ideology I see fit. That is what I'm doing. The fact is that Sharia law is inherently unequal between men and women. It denies women unilateral rights to divorce. It denies women child custody. The system itself is therefore unwelcome in a 21st century democracy. It isn't compatible with English laws. It is the legitimisation of this system, the empowering of this system that we object to. We also object to the fact that it is overwhelmingly run, these are not an extreme fringe, they have a lot of power, by Islamists and jihadists, and we strongly object to that. And as for the division argument, well, I'm not the one who is calling for death by stoning. I'm not the one who is saying that, women should be beaten. This is not coming from me. All I'm doing is drawing attention to what they're doing, and I have every right to do so.
Anna Khan, you just said that's outrageous. Why is it outrageous? Is it not true?
If I went and said that a Norwegian serial killer is the voice of Christianity because that's what he is doing, it would be considered ridiculous. You do not pick on less than 0.1% of the population and say that they are representing Islam. This is a disservice to British people. British people are very tolerant. They want justice for all of their people, and they don't believe in pushing people into the corners. No, this is completely wrong. We need to make the English legal system meet the rights.
Do you have, Anne-Marie Waters, do you have a particular problem with the Islamic faith? Or, are you a broader secularist? Do you think that the religion and the law should be kept completely separate no matter what the faith is?
Absolutely. I've been a member of the National Secular Society for a long time. However, I recognise that there are things within Islam which are particularly problematic for women, and I will say so. I have the right to say so, and I can point to Islamic countries, to Sharia law, to prove that that is the case. I'm simply observing what I see and opposing it, which is my right to do so.
Do you think that church marriages under the Church of England should be made illegal, and that only state registered?
They're registered. I don't have a problem with religious marriages alongside registered ones. The legal marriage is the marriage. The legal marriage is what counts.
Anne-Marie, what's been your reaction to the Law Society issuing guidance for British lawyers on how to interpret and help Muslim clients if they wish to incorporate, for example, a will which has been drawn up under Sharia? Should the Law Society be doing that?
No, they shouldn't. The problem with the Law Society's guidance is, again, the legitimisation of a legal system which is inherently unequal between men and women. We oppose that inequality. We think men and women should be equal under the law, and we believe that the Law Society's guidance, again, sanitises the idea of Sharia law generally. So people will think, well, if the Law Society is issuing guidance on it, all these things about it being unequal for women mustn't be true. It's sanitised. And by the way, there's a great hypocrisy from the Law Society on this. They wouldn't allow, for example, a Christian group to even discuss same-sex marriage because they said it was in breach of their equality and diversity commitments.
Anna Khan, you're obviously not speaking for the Law Society, but what do you make of Anne-Marie's argument there that it's something the Law Society shouldn't even be getting involved in?
This is Law Society guidance for solicitors to recognise that there are a large number of Muslims who want to make wills according to Sharia. So testamentary disposition has not changed. You can still give away everything to a dog's home and nothing to your family. Islamic law simply says under a formula in the Quran that there's a formula by which you cannot cut out your family. You can only give away 1/3 to anyone you wish. So it's just recognising that some Muslims wish to obey that rule. The Law Society can do what they like. They can give me guidance on conveyancing, wills, family law, and that's their duty.
It will legitimise the idea that Sharia law is something that can be accepted under the British legal system.
Then Anne-Marie has a lot of angles to fight. You have to fight Islamic finance, where student loans are coming in. You have to fight that. I know, I've seen your website. So you'd need to fight on many, many fronts. Muslims are not just foreigners. They are UK born and bred, they're Scottish Muslim converts, they're Irish converts, they're young black Afro-Caribbeans. It's not a foreign element to get rid of. So the sooner you realise there's a reason why people are converting, but because they're finding real solace and beauty in a faith, Stop seeing it as the enemy within and try and see the beauty of it. You might do better.
I take issue with the word. You're telling me what I think. I have never used the words enemy within. I have the right to oppose a misogynistic legal system in this democracy if I see fit.
I'm actually going to be with you.
So you say.
So let's get together and do that then.
We've reached a point of agreement.
I hope you'll support me in that.
Thank you very much, both. I'm glad there's some common ground there. It's a very topical issue. I want to thank you both, Anne-Marie Waters from Sharia Watch UK and Anna Khan from Duncan Lewis Solicitors. Thank you very much for joining me here on The Voice of Russia in London.
Of the Prophet Muhammad, and several millennia down the road now, we have a duty as Muslims in every country in which we find ourselves to apply those laws by analogy to our situations now. So the one mistake everyone makes is that it's immutable and it's set in stone and that we can't change it. In fact, it's our duty to apply it to our lives as we live them now as good, law-abiding citizens of each country.
So it would be a religious teaching rather than a system of law as Westerners would understand it.
If there's an Islamic state, then they would apply Sharia as a system of law. It would apply across every part of your life. It would be your family life, inheritance, it could be in cases of Sharia punishments, it would be the economic system. So it's not for Sunday best, it's for every single aspect of your life.
Have you any idea what sort of percentage of, say, Muslims in Britain, what sort of numbers or percentage of those would regard Sharia as a relevant part of their lives?
In the last census, about 3 years ago, it was 2.7 million Muslims, about 1 million of them in London. So out of those, a great number are young, under 30. And I'm finding in my daily practice of speaking to Muslim clients and organizations that they are increasingly interested in their faith and applying Sharia as a solution alongside, or rather within, English law.
Now, Anne-Marie Waters, you are behind Sharia Watch UK. You obviously think there's something that needs to be watched. What's your objection to Sharia law as such?
First of all, I completely understand that there's a spiritual dimension to the word Sharia, as Anna has just described it. We're not interested in private religious faith of people. What we are interested in and what we object to is the network of Sharia councils and tribunals and the men who run them. The men who run them are openly...
Please explain to us what the word Sharia actually means.
Sharia in Arabic means a path to water. And so in a desert kingdom where Islam was first brought in 1,400 years ago, it was obviously a very scarce resource to have water. The analogy is that it sort of lights your path through the darkness, or it leads to water when you're thirsty.
And of course, the word Sharia to most Westerners now means Sharia law. What is the connection with legal affairs in the Muslim world and the path to water?
So Sharia was laid down in the Quran, which is the holy book of Muslims, and then it was explained through the sayings and actions.
Hello and welcome to In Conversation. I'm Tim Eckott, and my guests today are here to discuss the thorny issue of Sharia law in Britain. The Law Society in London sparked controversy recently by issuing guidelines to lawyers on how to draw up wills according to Sharia teaching. Now, a new organisation called Sharia Watch UK has been set up to look into what it says are the misogynistic principles inherent in this traditional Islamic system. Anne-Marie Waters is from Sharia Watch UK. I'm also joined by Anna Khan. She's head of the Islamic department at Duncan Lewis Solicitors. Anna Khan, let me start with you. You are a Muslim woman.